Go. So I'm Michael Sod. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to go through our quick presentation that I put together just based on some questions that we've had from a lot of clients, law firms just like you, just kind of trying to figure out what to do in this pandemic situation. So I've kind of put together 18 slides just outlining some of the tactical things you'll be able to do. And then we can go through any questions that everyone has, as we get towards the end. So at this point, the crisis we face is immediate and inevitable. I mean, I'm sure that you see it already in your backyard with closures from everything at the mall to, some of your supermarkets now closing early. For law firms specifically, making cutbacks and trying to stay low to weather the storm because you don't think customers want to hear from you, or now just might not be the best time, may seem like a good move. But while some firms are pulling back, others are preparing for the future and looking to evolve. And that's really what this conversation is about. It's about getting you ready to prepare to evolve, because things are going to change. It's just a matter of how fast and how and when you'd like to go ahead and implement those things. So in the next hour, we're going to discuss these three questions that I had sent out, as well as go through any questions that you have. So we'll talk about, how does my law firm need to evolve to stay ahead of the game after the pandemic ends, because we know it's going to eventually end, right? Is it okay to market myself during this time? And if so, what marketing tactics should I be implementing if I'm facing cutbacks? Those are all questions that, doesn't matter what kind of law firm you have, whether it's personal injury, family law, you do any kind of estate planning and stuff like that, you're going to have these types of questions, right? So I'm Michael Sod. I've been in advertising for over 15 years. I'm fortunate enough to have worked with some of America's greatest companies like Reynolds America, Coca-Cola, Snyder's-Lance, and more. We've won lots of great awards, from American Advertising Awards to top advertising agency in the US from Upwork. We're also a Google preferred partner, and we manage well over 6 figures a month in advertising ad spend. So we see a lot of what's happening, that a lot of the change that's been happening really has been happening over the last 4 weeks. So that's what we're trying to prepare our clients and everybody here who's joining us today for, what's to happen as things evolve, because they're changing fast. So question one, how does my law firm need to evolve to stay ahead of the game after the pandemic ends? And there's really three things you have to focus on, right? And this seems like, hey, makes sense, right? You want to ruthlessly prioritize. I want to make sure that I have all my ducks in a row, but that's not really what this means. And we'll go through that. We want to focus on hand raisers, and we'll talk about that as well. And then we want to adapt to the digital revolution 2.0. And what I mean by that is, we already went through the .com era where everybody rushed to the internet, and now we're seeing a transition again into how the internet is changing. Automations are coming into play. AI is coming into play. Direct callbacks are coming into play. All of these things are coming into play that weren't there 20 years ago. And now, because of the pandemic, because of our social distancing, we're forced to utilize some of these tools a little bit faster than what we would have normally adapted for had this not happened. So video conferencing and things like that, those are all going to be extremely important to grow your firm as we start to get beyond this pandemic. So step one is ruthlessly prioritizing your business, right? Find all human expenses that can be covered by tools and automations, and start to implement that technology. And we'll talk about some of those tools a little bit later, but it's really now is really the time where you need to learn how to use digital platforms to make your life easier, to make it more fluent, and to cut out some of the excess expenses that human error bring to the table, right? Step two, once you've kind of figured out what you can cut and what direction you want to take in terms of tools, is really honing in on your acquisition costs per the marketing platforms you're currently executing on. So if you're executing a Google Ads campaign, a Facebook campaign, if you have billboards up, if you're running TV commercials, what is your acquisition cost for each of those campaigns? Where do you see a growth based on time of year or time of day or terms that they've been searching if it's a Google campaign? Try to figure out where your success is coming from and then look to scale based on those numbers. Anytime that you're able to outline exactly what your cost per lead and your cost per acquisition are per platform, you become a much better marketer. And that will allow you the opportunity to focus on things that are working and really start to cut out some of the things that aren't, which leads us to step three. If you're focusing your firms on cases that aren't bringing in money because you assume that people are searching for them, it's a non-win game. You just can't scale efficiently doing that. And what I mean by that is we've seen law firms, and we see law firms quite often run campaigns, let's say for family law, and they drive traffic to their website. But on their website, most of what they talk about is personal injury cases and things of that nature, right? So their continuity between the ad and what the customer potentially sees is not there. When you have consistency, you can go deeper, right? You can become a subject matter expert in your area, in your local market. And as you see success, you can then scale to other types of law. But in this time, this pandemic time, where you're looking to save money and cut out the fat, you need to figure out what cases are really paying the bills and keeping you above that red line. And you need to focus on where those business leads, where those clients are potentially coming from, how much they're costing, what tactics you're using to get them there, and then figure out the way to scale based on that knowledge. Otherwise, you're spreading yourself extremely thin. You're focusing yourself on a lot of different things when there's really no rhyme or reason for it. It's just going to end up costing you more time and more money, which at this point is something that you may or may not have. So step two is focusing on hand raisers. And what I'm showing you here is the consumer disposition funnel. If you haven't seen this before, it evolves over time. Some people show you with evaluation and some people go from intent to purchase. This is the most recent one with evaluation in there. At each level of this disposition funnel, you're going to want to give your customers or potential customers more information about what you can provide them. In this current state, I would suggest that you focus on intent. And by that, I mean you focus on things like Google Ads, an extremely strategic campaign through Google Ads. If you can't afford Google Ads, you think that it's a loss of money, then what you need to do is set up campaigns for remarketing so that anybody who has previously seen your landing page or website is going to continue to see your ads so that you can drive them further down the CDF, because again, they came to the site, they saw that you handled family law, personal injury, whatever the scenario was, there was some interest, they left. Because they left, they would be served consideration ads that give them more information about the types of cases that you've handled, case studies outlining the success stories that you've had. That consideration will bring them back to the site to read those blog posts, to check out that information, to evaluate you more, and to hopefully book and schedule that appointment so that you can then obtain the retainer. That's the name of the game at this point. So focusing on the intent, this bottom half of the funnel, is really where you're going to find success. And we'll go through a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. And step three is evolving with the digital revolution, where automation will be king. And we've touched on this just a little bit, and we'll continue to get deeper as we get through the presentation, right? Step one in evolving is, again, cutting out the unnecessary human touch points. What I've done right here is I've laid out 3 different bullet points in terms of a process that we'll go through a little bit later, where you can capture, nurture, and process payments for your customer's life cycle journey, right? From becoming aware and intent to actually paying. And through each of these different scenarios, 1, 2, and 3, you can implement a strategy where there is literally little to no human engagement at all outside of your marketing manager or agency like what we do, right? So capturing leads using using landing pages, using surveys, using forms meaning like lead magnet forms, how-tos, watch out checklists, things like that, depending on the type of niche that you have, so that it basically nurtures the relationship. As they opt in to those different magnets, to those different lead forms, they'll get automatic messages, whether it's from Facebook, voicemail drops, text messages, Facebook Messenger. Those all have 95% open rate outside of email, which is obviously quite a bit less depending on how often you email and what you're actually emailing about. But Facebook Messenger, direct drop for voicemails, and SMS text messaging are prime candidates for you to capture leads and get them to book consultations without talking to a single person. And then after all of this stuff is happening, as you're entering your information, after you've gone through and you've qualified this person, you've had your consultation, you can then go into our system and basically hit from lead to a conversion, and it will automatically send out an invoice for them to go and pay, so that you don't have to worry about getting back on the phone and collecting that retainer payment. And through that process, we'll help you track all of those things. And if you're not tracking those things right now, then that's really the most important. How much the lead costs to get somebody from your click to your landing page, how much the landing page opt-in costs. So from them getting to that page, how much does it cost for the person to take the next step, filling in their information? Then from filling in their information, how often are they then booking their appointment? From the appointment, how often do they become a client? And then when you have all that information, you'll be able to qualify what your actual cost to acquire a new customer is per specific platform. And all of that stuff happens without people there, right? All of those messages, emails, they're all pre-posed, they're all automated, so that you literally just have to be ready for the appointment when they schedule it. So question 2, we now know that, hey, it's a scenario where you should definitely still be marketing yourself. Is it okay to promote myself, my law firm, during a pandemic? 100%, absolutely, and without a doubt. Now, how you do that is really important, because marketing for marketing's sake is not going to necessarily get you any better quality leads. But customers are still getting divorced. They're still getting into accidents. They're still going through trials and tribulations at work. All of these cases are still going to need to be handled at some point. You becoming a local subject matter expert right now and adapting your messaging to your ideal avatar is only going to make you more qualified when courts go back into session and cases are being and judgments are being held and things of that nature are getting back into motion. You can still have mediations. You can still have these voice conferences with your clients to get prepared for that day. It's okay for you to still have billable hours going out, because these conversations are necessary for you to be able to give them value in their case, right? I mean, that's the only thing that you can do right now, is prepare them and prepare yourself for when court does open. And in most cases that we've seen, billable hours, once the hour is gone, it's gone. There's no way for you to get it back, right? You can't get a refund for your time. So you have to be very, very, very cognizant that while you're booking these cases, you're having these face-to-face meetings so people understand that that's where their money is going, that's where their time is going. They don't have to be in your office. It can be as personal as, you know, you sitting in front of your computer and them doing the same thing. I mean, now that we're talking out loud, think about how judgments happen currently when cases are in court and the offender is in jail, right? They're already having some of those virtual cases take place. As this pandemic progresses, I can guarantee you those types of scenarios are going to be posed. So as we mentioned, you know, again, it's 100% okay to market yourself. There is no ill will or disrespect to those who are sick or have passed. People are still getting injured, divorced, and committing crimes, and they need help. So you got to be there for them. You also want to keep in mind that those prospective clients are looking for legal services more often than not. They're calling multiple firms. I'm sure you've seen it already. You probably deal with it all the time. They call multiple firms, one after another, until they get to somebody who either A, answers the phone first, or B, is the cheapest provider given whatever circumstance that they're going through. If you're not in that mix, though, if you're not one of those people that they're calling, you've already lost that battle. So if you're not, you know, marketing yourself, putting yourself in a position so that they can call you, you've lost that battle. There's no coming back from that. And as I mentioned, providing value and becoming an expert, this is kind of the process that we would suggest. You know, obviously you want to be sensitive about the messaging, tone, and imagery for any new ad placements that you put up. You want to look to provide value through digital assets. This is your time to create digital assets so that customers have an opportunity to engage with you as a local subject matter expert. Two things happen here. Because it's a digital asset, you can track the engagement levels for that piece of content. So as you see more people engaging with it, you know it's good and you can build on that. If nobody's clicking on that ad and downloading that piece of content, then obviously you know that something needs to change, whether it's the headline or the type of content that you're serving. When we say content, we mean create a checklist and give them some additional useful information that they can download. It needs to be based on your niche, obviously, and also based on their expected goals. So one thing that came to us from a family lawyer is like, what can I do? Well, how to prepare for a divorce while dealing with COVID-19, because obviously if you're going through a divorce at this point in time and court is not in session, you still need to know what to prepare for as a person going through the divorce, right? I still have questions. I need to understand what the process is going to be. I need to understand what steps I need to take, what documents I need to provide you. But maybe I don't know any of that stuff, right? So that's your opportunity to become the expert and say, well, hey, this is what you need, exactly what you need to get you to your end goal. And then with all of that, as you start to see people engage with you and opt into your lead magnets, you can host a live informational meeting just like this, where you have the opportunity to present case studies and discuss your process, potential pitfalls that they may run into, and alternative avenues for success based on cases that you've already handled. This is your opportunity to have that open forum with customers who need your help. Now, when I say host these live events, it's easy for you to generate leads that way because people need information. And because the live event is in a scenario where it is you on the screen and them sitting in their home, it's still personal, but you can have multiple people there without having them engage with one another. And then after the fact, you say, if you have personal questions, you know, please opt in for a consultation. We're giving out X, Y, and Z, or we're doing whatever it is that you want to do in terms of your offer. That's the way that you're going to build credibility right now in your local market without spending a ton of extra money on ads and things of that nature. Now, I'm not saying not to spend money on ads, because obviously that's what we're here to talk about, and you're going to need to do that. But we're also talking about marketing through a pandemic to grow your business so that in 30 days, you're not out of business, right? In 30 days, you have 10 new clients who are ready to get things moving, or have already paid you your retainer. That's what we're working towards. And now we lean into the third question. What marketing tactics should I implement even if I'm facing cutbacks? And we've talked about some of these things through this conversation already, using software to remove all of your hard costs. And I'm sorry to say this next part, but chances are you've already fired or you're gonna fire the receptionist whose job it is to call back prospects, to get them to sign forms, and to remind them to show up to meetings. I'm not talking about your paralegal. I'm talking about the lady who answers the phone or gentleman who answers the phone at the front desk, who unfortunately is generally the first person to go. I mean, if you can handle all of those things where you have people calling you back, you have them scheduling appointments, you have them paying, and it's all automated, what is the purpose of having a physical, what's the point of having a physical person there to do that? It doesn't make sense, right? Might as well save the overhead. And that's sad to say that some people may lose their jobs, but that's just the nature of the beast as things progress. Step 2 is focus on intent-based marketing. And we talked a little bit about that. We'll go through that a little bit deeper now, but really focusing on those hand raisers, on people who show you that they are ready to sign the retainer paperwork and to get things moving. That's who you want to focus on. And if you can't pay for Google ads, remember, focus on remarketing. If someone came to your website, you should always be remarketing to them. And then offer a free consultation. It's not going to cheapen your services. It is a low and no barrier to entry for you and your firm. I'm not telling you that in your consultation, you need to give these people the world and everything. But what I am saying is that consultation is your opportunity to listen to their problems, to agitate that problem. And I don't mean make it worse, but pose the worst possible scenario if they don't do anything. And then as you do that, you inject yourself as the solution, right? And we'll go through that process a little bit more, because I think that's probably the most important thing that we'll talk about this whole time. Your consultations you should think about that as dollar signs every time you get on the phone, because that is your opportunity to take that extremely important moment and turn it into profit for your business. And then once it becomes profit, that's when you put your lawyer hat on and you start to solve problems. But before that, you're 100% in it for the business. That's how it works. So what does that mean? Using software to remove all your hard costs, right? All of these icons you see here are different pieces of software, mechanisms, tools, whatever you want to call them, to to get leads into your funnel and ultimately to become your client. So you have places to generate leads at the very top. You have places to capture those leads. You have places to nurture those leads, emails and CRM systems. And then you have places to close those leads, whether it's call rail or calendar appointments, and then payment processors, right? We can help you implement all of these things without adding extra people, without having to add extra overhead, and with saving your customer a headache of back and forth trying to understand all of the nuances that are necessary for them to become a client, right? If you streamline this process, if you're able to qualify the cost for each of these elements, and then again, break down the acquisition cost as the user gets through each of these levels, at the time that they get to a customer, you'll be able to understand how to scale your business efficiently and effectively without wasting money, without wasting time, and without wasting additional headaches and efforts. It's just that easy. It's just a matter of understanding the tools, how they work, and how they'll work with your business. I mean, there's a lot of setup that happens with this stuff, but I promise you, once it is set up, it's all about fine tuning it, creating that continuity, consistency, and then you'll start to see efficiency in your business. So As we automate some of those things, we'll start to talk, and we talked a little bit about, marketing and remarketing and focusing on hand raisers. And I mentioned this in the beginning. If you have the budget to start with Google Ads, that's where I would suggest you start with a strategic intent-based Google marketing campaign, and then follow it up with a hardcore Facebook remarketing campaign. Once traffic is hitting your site, your landing page, you need to create multi-level ad sets to give customers opportunities to engage further with your ads and your brand as they see those additional things. What you see on the right-hand side is kind of a top-line process, right? This is the visitor. They get to your site. The visitor is tracked, right? We get some kind of pixel tracking. Then they leave the site taking no action, going to Facebook. They see your ad. At this point, we'll have a few different scenarios for ads. You might have a static image. You may have a couple of videos. Those videos may be testimonials from past clients or a case study. What you need to do is set up all of your audience, your custom audiences, to track the people who engage with that video or ad, if it's a static ad, at different levels. So 3 seconds of your video, you want to show them a little bit more. You show them the same ad until they get to 25% of the video. If they've seen 25% of the video, then you start remarketing ad 2, which is maybe a second case study that gives them a little bit more information. If they see 50% of that second video, then maybe you show them a third ad, which is a different ad, but they don't get to that third ad unless they've seen a certain percentage of ad 1 and a certain percentage of ad 2. That way you're telling them a story without overwhelming them every time they get on Facebook. Because eventually what happens is customers turn you off. If they see the same ad over and over and over again, they turn you off. If they click the likes, comments, and shares, and they're from a year ago, they turn you off, or they talk crap and then they turn you off. And we see it over and over and over again. Now, there are definitely ways that you can utilize some of those old campaigns, and we can talk about that at a later date, but you definitely need to make sure that if you don't have the budget for Google Ads, you have to have your tracking set up correctly, your pixel set up correctly, and then you have to set up remarketing campaigns. It's extremely important. It's probably the most important thing that you'll do for your business. Now, as we discussed, if you need clients now, offer a free consultation. Free consultations are your way to weed out and close prospects if they're a good fit. While you qualify them, you need to make sure that you give them the opportunity to talk. All of the calls that you take should be scripted. You should have specific questions that you're going to ask to drive the conversation how you want it to go. That is the most important thing that you will ever do for your business, is creating a script that you can follow. Obviously, it'll nuance as you grow, but you need a script that you can follow. And then when you turn those reins over to your pair or whoever else that's taking those calls, then they have something that they can follow that allows them to lead the conversation without giving advice, because now is not the time to give advice. It's the time to listen. You provide value at the end of the conversation. And this is what I was talking about earlier. All of these calls, these scripted calls, should go this way. Problem. Hi, nice to meet you. How can we help you? What issues are you facing? Have them tell you their problem. When they are speaking about their issues, you just reaffirm their issues. Oh, so you're going through a divorce, and that's going to change your life because of the things that they just told you. Oh, you just got into an accident and you don't have funds for your kids to do X, Y, and Z. I understand. You have to tell them what they're telling you. That is the most important part of the initial stage of the conversation. Make them feel confident that you're listening. That's one. Then two, as you understand what they're going through, you've reiterated them to them what they're going through. You're going to agitate the solution, the scenario, and by that I mean you're going to basically tell them the worst case scenario. What happens if you do nothing? You know, this is what happens if you do nothing. You get the point. You have to agitate that scenario a little bit for them to feel compelled enough to make a decision. And that's where you provide yourself and your firm as the solution, right? You bridge that gap between the problems that they have and cases that you've already handled to show them that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you are the hand that's going to take them there, right? I mean, that's the premise of the conversation. And once they understand that you are the solution, you move on to asking for the retainer. You know, you get them to sign their contract. You say, okay, if everything sounds good to you, I'd like to go ahead and get the retainer taken care of. We'll get you contracts, and then we'll get you set up for our first meeting where we'll talk about more of your situation, what's happened. You'll present me with more of your facts and documentation, and then we'll start to move down the process. That's essentially how the call should go. It doesn't have to be long-winded. It doesn't have to be you giving your recommendations, and you should not be telling these people, these are my thoughts right now. You should say, I think we can definitely help you. These are the scenarios that we've helped in the past. We'd love to be able to put you in the same situation that we've done for our clients in the past. But for us to be able to give you all of our attention, this is what it's going to take. And you go through the process, X, Y, and Z. So the calls generally, it's different, right? It's different depending on the type of the niche that you have. I like to tell my clients 30 to 45 minutes makes people feel like you are listening. Under 30 minutes, I feel like I'm rushed, especially if it's my first call. 45 minutes to an hour is ideal for these types of calls, especially when you're going through the questioning process. But you have to remember, time is money. So if you're not leading the call and you're getting close to the hour and you're not at the point where you have been able to qualify these people enough to say, hey, we need to get to here for me to get you to X, Y, and Z, that's when you need to start to reevaluate the script and potentially adjust the questions and then, you know, go back at it. So I would say in the 45-minute-ish range, but it really depends on you. Now, some cases may be bigger than others. They may take more time, right? So again, it's all personal and depends on how often you run through these scripts. The point is you have to have a script or you'll lose it. I promise you. I see it happen all the time. We record hundreds and hundreds of calls daily for these clients, and we go back through once a month with them to spot check some of their call centers, or if they're the ones taking the call, we go back to listen to them and give them feedback. And I can tell you more often than not, the ones that don't follow the script never close the deal. It's crazy, but it's true. It's like you start talking about everything else aside from closing your business. You know, you're giving them recommendations and tips and tools and all of these things, which is great, but it's great for the second conversation, not the first. And so that's why if it gets to that point where you feel like all of my calls are an hour and a half, we need to sit down and talk about your questions, what you're asking these people. So, and that leads us into our next thing. What other questions do you guys have? One came up a little bit earlier. How much should I potentially look to spend? I think that's really, again, it's one of those things that it is personal, and it depends on if you know your costs, right? If you know what your acquisition cost is, if you know what your CPL is, it's easy for me to say, hey, you should spend X because you know every time you spend X, you're going to get 2 times your money. Without knowing that stuff, it's hard. Now, most firms that we see spend anywhere from, depending on the size of the firm, anywhere from $50 to $100 a day on paid ads. Um, that's not, you know, untypical. If you live in a larger market, you may be paying a lot more than that. But again, you have to understand that if you're getting 30 leads, and of those 30 leads, 20 of them become consults, quote unquote consults, and of those 20 consults, you get, let's say, 5 to 8 that become retainer clients, and the retainer is $3,500. Well, now you're talking $15,000 to $20,000 for the month. Now, spending $3,000 is no longer an issue. Now, again, there's overhead. You have to consider all of those things. You have to consider, but we're just talking rough numbers. Once we have the opportunity to go through, with most first businesses, we'll go through, we'll audit their campaigns, any marketing they've done in the past, and then we'll be able to give them, kind of, hey, this is what our direction would be. These are the steps we would take. And if you want us to manage it, this is what would happen. Any other questions? Okay, I guess everyone is good. So what happens next? What happens after this, right? Well, if you're interested in staying ahead of the game and you're interested in growing your practice without adding extra complexity to your already hectic day, it can happen in 3 quick steps. And if you book with us this week, we'll actually create you a free landing page that you can use at any point in time, whether you choose to use our services or not. But basically what will happen is you'll schedule a meeting, and the meeting will actually be with me. I'd like to have a 1-hour meeting with anybody that joins. I'll send you an R&D form. It's basically 10 quick questions so that I have a better understanding of where your business is. And then I can give you clear direction once we get on the call. Once we get on the call, we'll talk a little bit more about our process. And then if everything sounds good to you, then we can go ahead and get things moving so that your next step is really taking calls and closing clients. So if that sounds interesting to you, I'd love to get you on the schedule. Just go to meet.digital1010.com, click the 1-hour consulting, enter your information. I'll shoot you over the R&D form, and we'll get everything squared away for you. I hope that you found real value in this information. I hope that you enjoyed the conversation. Again, my name is Michael Saad. I'm the CEO and founder of Digital 1010 and the law firm Accelerator. My email is msod@digital1010.com. My phone number is 904-242-6684. And if you'd like to book your consult, please go ahead and do so now at meet.digital1010.com. So before we end this, is there any other questions or anything else that you guys would like to go through? Ginger, John, Michael?
Yeah, Michael, this is Ginger. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So we usually charge a pretty hefty consultation fee because what we consider a consultation is more like a legal strategy session.
Sure.
And for us to go, so for example, a consultation with me is $385.
Okay.
And a consultation with my associates is $250.
Okay.
So how would we sort of change our focus if we wanted to go to a free consultation model? Would we style it as a discount or a new program or something? Like, how would we, because people are really used to us. We're sort of a local leader in our field, and so we're considered
where are you guys located?
a premium firm.
Yeah, where are you located?
In San Diego.
Okay. And what type of firm?
Immigration.
So there's 2 things, right? You can offer the value proposition where you can give people a discount. I think really the thing that you're going to want to focus on is 2 things, right? Number one is providing some kind of, maybe not, because I'm sure your strategy sessions are probably a little bit longer than an hour, are they not?
Usually between an hour and an hour and a half, and I give a lot of content.
Yeah, and I think that that's probably where you can pull back a little bit.
Mhm.
And you can say, okay, the first consultation is really to understand if you're a good fit for us and we're a good fit for you. And then if that becomes the scenario, then two things happen. One, you can lead them into because if it's a 30-minute conversation where you're asking, just some few qualifying questions, and if they're a good fit, you say, okay, well, because you've taken the initiative in the first step, we generally charge $385 or $250 for our consultation hour. If you're willing to sign up to book today, we can do a 50% initial strategy session, and then this is what our retainer fees are. Or you can go right into, after having that conversation, this is what our retainer fees are. We have a $350 deposit for us to continue to move forward.
Maybe we could call it a free screening, just because the term consultation,
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
probably
has
been
kind of a
used.
specific meaning in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely understand that. And nuancing the terminology is absolutely okay. It's just understanding that you have to separate what value you give them in that strategy session to
Mhm.
this being a sales call.
Right.
I think that's really the main differentiator when you start to talk to these people. It's really fact finding, and then after the fact finding, it's like, hey, we think you're a great fit. We appreciate the conversation. Our next step is to, and then you go into the next step.
Okay, great. And may I ask another question?
Absolutely.
So you had a point earlier, that I was interested in hearing more about in terms of evolving.
Yeah.
Do you suggest that we kind of look at our maybe subspecialties and try to focus, on particular subspecialties that would be more relevant to current conditions? Um,
So what I would suggest is there's two things. Number one, your current client base, there has to be um, some kind of indicator as to where the revenue is coming from.
mhm.
And while I would suggest definitely creating a test campaign to focus on COVID-19 type cases,
Right.
uh, I probably would not change your entire strategy to focus on that.
Got
Uh,
it.
and the reason for that is, you know, and this is what we talked about a little bit earlier, if you find what works, continue to focus on what works and scale that. As you get to a point where you're like, hey, we can handle other things, that's when you add some of the nuanced or more specialized marketing opportunities. So, and for you, I think, and this goes for anybody who's listening, it's really as long as it's within your niche, right? So, talking about immigration and immigration COVID-19, it's still immigration. There is just a secondary layer there. What
Hmm.
I was meaning was like, let's say you're talking about immigration today, and then tomorrow you're advertising for, let's say, slip and fall accidents.
Oh yeah, no, not at all. We don't do that.
Like that's the type of stuff that we see, especially when it comes to firms that are two lawyers. They're like, well, you can handle one, I'll handle the other, we'll just run our marketing together. You're just going to waste money, time, effort. All these things become a problem because you're sending out mixed signals to customers who are looking for a subject matter expert. That's why we go to lawyers.
Right. Okay. Great. That's really helpful.
Definitely. Give everyone kind of one more minute. So I think, if there are no more questions, like I said, feel free to, add some time to my schedule, Ginger, I'd love to sit down and talk about how we can potentially help automate some of those processes or audit some of your campaigns to help grow your firm. If there's anything that we can do, please feel free to let me know.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope that you guys found value in today.
Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great one.
Okay. Have a great day. Thank you.